Hi everyone, my name is Alia. Welcome to my booktube channel. In this video, I will be doing a review for the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and it will be a non-spoiler review. There are 3 books in the Shadow and Bone series. The first book is Shadow and Bone, followed by the second book, which is Siege and Storm, and the final book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy is the Ruin and Rising. I'm going to start my review with a brief synopsis of the Shadow and Bone trilogy. This trilogy is about Alina Starkov. She grew up in an orphanage in Karamzin, Ravka with her best friend Malin Aratsev, and they grew up and become soldiers for the First Army, which is the King's Army. The story starts with the soldiers, including Alina and Mel, crossing the Unsea, also known as the Fold. So the Fold is a strip of barren land enveloped by a cloud of darkness, and it is inhabited by flesh-eating monsters known as the Volcras. The Volcras are basically creatures of darkness, and they are very sensitive to light. So Alina and Mel were crossing the Fold for the first time, and their carriers were attacked by the Volcras. In the middle of the mayhem, Mel was attacked by the Volcras among the other soldiers. So to save her best friend, who Alina also has very strong non-platonic feelings for, she accidentally summoned the light for the first time. So what does that has anything to do with a Grisha? In the world of Shadow and Bone, a Grisha is a person who was born with a talent. For example, the Squallers have the ability to manipulate air, the Inferni can manipulate fire, and the Tidemaker can manipulate water. There are also other talents like Metrology. There are engineers of sorts, and then there are also the tailors who can change other people's appearance. And the Heartrenders, my favorite, have the ability to manipulate the body on a molecular level, like crushing the lungs or control a person's heartbeats. Also on the spectrum are Grisha, who have special talents like the Shadow Summoners, people who can summon darkness, and Alina, who is the Sun Summoner, where she can summon light. In the Grisha verse, the Grisha are not very welcome outside of Ravka. So in Ravka, the Grisha unite under the Darkling, and they serve the kingdom as the Second Army. So when Alina accidentally summoned light in the Fold to save Mel, she was identified as the first Sun Summoner. So after the identification, the Darkling rushed her to the capital because her power is unique and valuable, which makes her a target to the Ravkan enemies. The Darkling is a respected figure, but he is also intimidating. So people are generally afraid of the Darkling because he is as powerful as he is volatile. He is also mysterious, and Alina, after meeting him, found herself to have strong attractions to him, and he seems to reciprocate her feelings. As the story goes on, it becomes obvious that the Darkling is actually the villain, and even though he has strong feelings for her, he has every intention to enslave her and make her power his. So why do I like the Shadow and Bone trilogy? I enjoyed the Grisha verse a lot because I find it an interesting, fresh, and intriguing world that the author has offered to the table. At the same time, I am not a fan of the Shadow and Bone trilogy because of the author's writing style. This is probably because the Shadow and Bone is the author's first novel, but I find the writing style in the Shadow and Bones trilogy, the first two books at least, is inconsiderate. I went through half of the first book not knowing what is really going on. I felt like the author took it for granted that her readers go into the book knowing what's what. While I was reading the first book, I had so many questions in my mind, like what is Grisha? What is the Darkling? What makes him so special? What is the Corporality? What's this and what's that? These things, they are not actually explained in the first part of the book. I obviously got my answers as the story progresses, but it was not a smooth reading experience. I would say that I was constantly distracted throughout the book because I kept wondering if I was missing explanations for what's what. And the second book, Storm and Siege, is worse than the first book. Storm and Siege is a total filler. Nothing really happens. The only good part of the Storm and Siege is Nikolai Lantsov. That's it. So in the third book, Rain and Rising, finally, because I have updated myself on the glossary and the state of things in the first and second book, the reading momentum becomes much better. The story ends surprisingly well. No grieving on my part, definitely. If there is one thing that I really respect about this book is that it actually gives great closures on the main characters. So it felt like the story properly came to an end, and I really enjoyed the ending of the final book. The saddest part of Rain and Rising is Aleksander towards the end of the book, and I think that the Netflix adaptation really lost something when they dropped Aleksander in the third or fourth episode of the first season. So on the language scale of 1-5, 1 being elementary and 5 being high proficiency of English, in my opinion, the Shadow and Bone trilogy is somewhere between a 2 and 2.3. A lot of common words, barely any big words. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would recommend it, but if you are reading the book because of the trend, then you would be disappointed solely on the basis that the trilogy is terribly overhyped, especially if you have watched the Netflix adaptation. The Netflix adaptation of the Shadow and Bone is actually pretty awesome, and I am looking forward to season 2, mostly because of the crows. I have seen the cast reveal for season 2, and I am really looking forward to watching it on Netflix. I give the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the novel, 3.5 stars. If you have read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, or if you have watched the Netflix adaptation, feel free to drop your comments in the comment section below. And if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you would like to see more of my channel, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.